I stared at my reflection in the mirror, smoothing down my black designer dress. Not the kind you buy at a department store, but the kind that speaks of corner offices and board meetings. The invitation to Anderson & Co.'s 30th anniversary gala sat on my vanity, its gold lettering catching the light. The same company where my father had worked for 25 years, climbing from junior accountant to senior partner. The same company he told me I'd never be good enough for. "You're too soft for business, Emma," he'd say, shaking his head whenever I mentioned following in his footsteps. "Leave the real work to your brother Michael." My phone buzzed. Speak of the devil. Dad's name flashed across the screen. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but old habits die hard. "Emma." His voice was sharp like it always was when he talked to me. "I heard you're planning to attend the company gala tonight." I took a deep breath. Yes, I received an invitation. From who? The suspicion in his tone was unmistakable. Does it matter? I kept my voice neutral, professional. 5 years ago his tone would have made me stammer and apologize. Not anymore. "Listen carefully," he said. "You're not welcome at the company party. This is for Anderson & Co. employees and important clients only." "Not." He paused and I could practically hear the sneer, "Whatever it is you're doing these days." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. If only he knew what whatever actually meant. "I understand perfectly, Dad," I said calmly. "Have a good evening." I hung up before he could respond, something I'd never have dared to do before. But I wasn't that scared little girl anymore. The one who'd left home 5 years ago with nothing but a business degree he'd dismissed as useless and determination he'd called stubbornness. My assistant Sarah knocked on my office door. Yes, my office on the top floor of a building my father had no idea I owned. "Everything's set for tonight," she said, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "The papers will be signed at midnight. Anderson & Co. won't know what hit them." I nodded, picking up the invitation again. 5 years of careful planning, of building my own company from scratch, of making strategic acquisitions while keeping my name out of the headlines. 5 years of watching my father promote my brother despite his mistakes, of hearing about family dinners I wasn't invited to, of being the daughter they pretended didn't exist. And tonight, at the grand Anderson & Co. anniversary gala, everything would change. Because while my father was busy telling me I wasn't welcome, he had no idea that as of midnight, I wouldn't just be attending his company's party. I would be owning it. The takeover had been months in the making. Quiet purchases of shares, private meetings with board members, carefully orchestrated negotiations with their biggest client, Maxwell Industries. My father, so confident in his position, hadn't even noticed the ground shifting beneath his feet. "Your car's ready," Sarah said, breaking into my thoughts. "And Mr. Maxwell confirmed he'll make the announcement at midnight." I stood up, smoothing my dress one last time. "Perfect. Let's give them a party they'll never forget." As my driver pulled up to the Anderson & Co. building, I could see the celebration in full swing through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, champagne flowed freely, and the city's business elite mingled in their finest attire. I took one last deep breath, grabbed my clutch and stepped out of the car. It was time to crash my father's party and his world. Walking into the office that morning, 6 hours before the gala, I couldn't help but remember the first time I'd stepped into Anderson & Company. I was 12, it was "Take Your Child to Work" day, and I'd been so excited to see where my father spent his days. I'd worn my best dress, a blue cotton thing with a Peter Pan collar that I thought made me look professional. How naive I'd been. "Emma, sit quietly and don't disturb anyone," Dad had instructed, parking me in a corner of his office with some coloring books. Meanwhile, Michael, only 2 years older than me, got to sit in on meetings, was introduced to clients, and was treated like a future executive in training. That day set the tone for the next 15 years. Every achievement of mine was dismissed, every ambition discouraged. When I graduated top of my class in business school, Dad barely looked up from his newspaper. "Book smarts aren't everything, Emma. Michael has real business instincts." The same Michael who had lost the company 3 major clients in his first year as junior partner. I walked through my own office now, running my fingers along the sleek mahogany desk. The view of downtown Manhattan stretched out before me, the Anderson & Co. building visible from my window. 5 years ago, I'd stood on the street looking up at that building, tears streaming down my face after another family dinner where I'd been told I wasn't cut out for the business world. "You're too emotional," Mom had said, not unkindly but with that patronizing tone she'd perfected over the years. "Maybe you should look into teaching or social work. Something more suitable." That night I'd made a decision. If my family wouldn't give me a chance, I'd create my own. I withdrew my entire savings, $50,000 I'd squirreled away from summer jobs and careful investing, and started my own consulting firm. For the first year I worked out of a tiny office above a Chinese restaurant, taking any client I could get. But I had something my family never expected. A vision. While Anderson & Co. stuck to traditional consulting methods, I saw the future in sustainable business practices and digital transformation. I hired young, hungry talents who others overlooked. We took chances, innovated, and most importantly, we delivered results. Sarah walked into my office, holding a tablet with our latest acquisition reports. She'd been with me since the beginning, the first person to believe in my vision. "The numbers are final," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "We now control 48% of Anderson & Co.'s shares. The deal with Maxwell Industries tonight will give us the controlling interest." I nodded, pulling up the documents on my computer. The last 5 years flashed through my mind, the late nights, the risks, the careful planning. I'd built my company, Wilson Consulting Group, into a powerhouse while keeping my name out of the press. My father, so convinced of his own importance, never bothered to check who was quietly buying up his company's shares. "Mr. Maxwell called again," Sarah continued. "He's looking forward to tonight. Said he can't wait to see their faces when they realize who's been behind everything." James Maxwell, CEO of Maxwell Industries, had been Anderson & Co.'s biggest client for 20 years. He'd also been increasingly frustrated with their outdated methods and resistance to change. When I'd presented my vision for the future of consulting to him 6 months ago, he'd been immediately interested. "Your father never mentioned how brilliant you are," he'd said during our first meeting. "My father doesn't know," I'd replied simply. Maxwell had laughed, a deep, genuine laugh. "Oh, this is going to be interesting." Looking at the clock, now 2 p.m., I felt a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. In 10 hours, everything would change. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a photograph, the only personal item in my office. It showed a 12-year-old me sitting in my father's office, beaming at the camera with hope and admiration in my eyes. That girl believed her father hung the moon. That girl thought if she worked hard enough, proved herself enough, she'd finally earn his approval. "Emma." Sarah's voice pulled me back to the present. "The dress is here." I looked up to see 2 assistants wheeling in a garment bag from Oscar de la Renta. Another small victory. The dress cost more than my father's first year's salary at Anderson & Company. "The hair and makeup team will be here at 5 o'clock, Sarah continued, checking her tablet. "Car service at 7:30. Mr. Maxwell will arrive at 11:45, and the announcement is scheduled for midnight exactly." I stood up, walking to the window. The Anderson & Co. building seemed to gleam in the afternoon sun, unaware that its entire power structure was about to shift. "Sarah," I said, still looking at the building, "call legal. I want to review the paperwork one more time. Everything has to be perfect tonight." As Sarah left, I thought about the text I'd received from Michael this morning. "Dad says you're planning to crash the party. Don't embarrass yourself, sis. You've done enough of that already." Oh, Michael. Always so confident, always so wrong. Tonight would change everything, not just ownership of Anderson & Co., but the entire dynamic of our family. The thought made me smile. I had a few hours left before I needed to start getting ready. Time to make sure every detail was in place, every document prepared, every possible scenario accounted for. Because tonight, when the clock struck midnight, I wouldn't just be arriving at the party. I'd be taking over. The Anderson & Co. building lobby was transformed into a glittering wonderland. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across marble floors, and the air hummed with classical music and the murmur of Manhattan's elite. I stood outside for a moment, watching through the glass doors as waiters weaved through the crowd with champagne flutes. My driver opened my door. "Good luck, Ms. Wilson." The doorman's eyes widened slightly as I approached. The Oscar de la Renta dress had been worth every penny. Black silk that seemed to absorb light, with subtle crystal beading that caught the eye only when I moved. Power dressing at its finest. "Invitation, ma'am?" I handed him the gold embossed card, watching his face carefully. No recognition, good. Despite my company's success, I'd kept my photo out of the press, using an old trick I'd learned from studying female CEOs. Let them underestimate you until it's too late. The grand staircase offered a perfect view of the party below. I spotted my father immediately, holding court near the bar. He was wearing his favorite Armani suit, the one he'd bought to celebrate making senior partner. Mom stood beside him, laughing at something one of the board members had said. Michael was there too, trying too hard to look important in a group of junior executives. Champagne, miss. A waiter appeared at my elbow. I took a glass, using it to hide my smile as I descended the stairs. The first person to notice me was Janet Chin, one of the board members I'd secretly met with months ago. Her eyes widened slightly, but she maintained her composure. Smart woman, it's why I plan to keep her on after the takeover. Emma. My mother's voice cut through the crowd. She was staring at me, her perfectly maintained smile slipping. What are you doing here? Hello, mother. I took a deliberate sip of champagne. Lovely party. I thought I made myself clear. My father appeared, his face darkening. You're not welcome here. Several heads turned our way. Perfect, let them watch. Actually, Dad, I have an invitation. I held up the envelope. Quite a legitimate one, in fact. Impossible. Michael stepped forward, his usual smirk in place. Only employees and major clients received invitations. Is that so? I raised an eyebrow, enjoying the moment. How interesting. Before he could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. James Maxwell had arrived right on schedule. At 11:45 p.m. exactly, just as planned. James. My father's anger vanished, replaced by his client-pleasing smile. So glad you could make it. Maxwell, imposing in his custom suit, scanned the room until his eyes found mine. He smiled, not at my father but at me. Wouldn't miss it for the world, Robert. Quite a night for celebrations, isn't it? My father preened, obviously thinking Maxwell was referring to Anderson & Co.'s anniversary. 30 years of excellence. And with the new contracts we've been discussing. Ah yes, about those contracts. Maxwell checked his watch. Perhaps we should wait a few minutes. I believe there's an announcement coming that might change things significantly. The confusion on my father's face was priceless. Announcement? I didn't authorize any announcements. No, Maxwell agreed pleasantly. You didn't. The next 15 minutes were quiet chaos for my family. I could see them trying to figure out what was going on, glancing nervously at Mr. Maxwell while pretending everything was fine. Mom's hand trembled as she sipped her champagne. Michael kept pulling at his collar like it was choking him. At 11:58, Sarah walked over to me and whispered, "Everything's ready." I nodded and stepped toward the center of the room. Right on time, Mr. Maxwell tapped his glass. The sound echoed through the room, silencing the guests. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice strong and calm. "As the biggest client of Anderson & Co. for the past 20 years, I've seen this company grow. But tonight begins a new chapter." I saw my dad's smile freeze. He sensed something was wrong. "As of midnight," Maxwell continued, "Anderson & Co. will have a new owner and a new CEO." He paused as everyone started whispering. "Let me introduce your new CEO and majority shareholder." The big grandfather clock in the lobby began chiming. With each bell, I took a slow step forward. My family's faces shifted, from confusion to shock to horror. Miss Emma Wilson. Mom's champagne glass slipped and shattered on the floor. Gasps filled the room. Dad's face turned pale. Michael looked like someone had punched him. Board members were already checking their phones, reading the news alerts that had just gone out. "This can't be real," Dad finally said. You can't do this." "Actually," I replied calmly, "I already did. Want to see the proof?" Sarah walked up with a leather folder. Inside were all the documents. Legal papers, share purchase records, board votes, contracts. Everything was real. Everything was mine. Michael stared at me. "Wait, Wilson Consulting Group? That's you." I smiled. "Yes, Michael. The same company you said was a joke. The one you said would never go anywhere. It's now the fastest growing consulting firm in the country. And it owns this company." As the clock finished its final chime, I stood in the very room where I was once made to feel like I didn't belong. I felt proud but also a little sad. This moment was everything I had worked for. But it also meant closing the door on my family as I knew it. So, I said, standing tall, should we talk about the future of Anderson & Co.? Or should I say, I paused, Wilson Global Partners? The next morning, I arrived at the office, now officially Wilson Global Partners, at 7 a.m. sharp. The security team, already informed about the leadership change, greeted me respectfully as I entered. My heels clicked against the marble floors. I noticed leftovers from last night's party, an empty glass, a dropped canopy. I took the executive elevator straight to what used to be my father's corner office. Sarah and her team had worked overnight to transform it. The dark wood furniture was gone, replaced with modern glass and steel. Old paintings had been replaced with digital screens showing live business data and global market news. Good morning, Ms. Wilson, Sarah said, handing me a coffee. Your father and brother have been in the conference room since 6. I smiled, remembering my father always saying, the early bird gets the worm, Emma. Not that you'd understand. If only he knew how many early meetings I'd had while secretly building my empire. How many employees are here so far? I asked as I sat down. About 30. We sent out the official memo at 5 a.m. Social media is already blowing up. I opened the news apps on my tablet. The headlines were exactly what I expected. Emma Wilson shocks business world with surprise takeover. Wilson Consulting Group buys Anderson & Co. Daughter becomes CEO in stunning power move. Your mother called 4 times, Sarah said quietly. I'm not surprised, I said, sipping my coffee. Any updates from the board? All but 2 are supporting the transition. Janet Chin has been especially helpful calming the nervous shareholders. I nodded. Everything was going exactly as planned. The fluorescent lights in the conference room buzzed with their usual irritating hum as I watched Derek Thornton pace behind the mahogany table like a predator circling prey. His expensive Italian suit couldn't hide the fact that he'd only been at Nexus Tech for 8 months, parachuted in as Vice President of Innovation after our previous leadership retired. What he lacked in technical knowledge he made up for in corporate buzzwords and an uncanny ability to take credit for other people's work. I sat in my usual chair, the one I'd occupied for the past 12 years, watching him flip through printouts of our quarterly performance metrics. Around the table my colleagues shifted uncomfortably. Jamie from Quality Assurance kept checking her phone, while Marcus from Development traced patterns on his notepad with obvious anxiety. Our flagship product, Nexus Flow, continues to drive 73% of company revenue, Derek announced, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone who'd never written a line of code in his life. But innovation has stagnated. We're not pushing boundaries anymore. I kept my expression neutral, though internally I was calculating how many all-nighters I'd pulled over the past decade perfecting Nexus Flow's core algorithms. The irony wasn't lost on me that Derek was criticizing lack of innovation while discussing a product that had revolutionized supply chain management for Fortune 500 companies worldwide. Alex, Derek's voice cut through my thoughts and I looked up to find his cold gray eyes focused on me. Your team's latest proposals are frankly disappointing. The encryption module updates you submitted last month were basic at best. I chose my words carefully. The encryption improvements increase security efficiency by 34% while reducing processing overhead. Our beta clients have reported significant performance gains. Performance gains, Derek repeated with a dismissive laugh. We're not running a maintenance shop, Alex. We need breakthrough innovations, not incremental improvements. The unfairness of it stung, but I'd learned to mask my reactions over the years. Derek had been systematically undermining my contributions since his arrival, taking credit for my innovations in board meetings while simultaneously criticizing my work in front of the team. What he didn't know, what nobody in this room knew, was that I held the foundational patents for the algorithms that made Nexus Flow possible. 8 years ago, during my own time and using my personal resources, I'd developed the core mathematical models that became Nexus Flow's backbone. The patent applications had been filed under my name through a small intellectual property firm I'd engaged privately. When Nexus Tech needed those algorithms for their new product, I'd quietly licensed them to the company through a shell corporation, keeping my ownership anonymous to avoid workplace complications. The licensing agreement had seemed like a win-win at the time. Nexus got cutting-edge technology and I received substantial royalty payments while maintaining my day job. Now, watching Derek pontificate about innovation while benefiting from my undisclosed intellectual property, that decision felt prophetic. Moving forward, Derek continued, we need to restructure our development priorities. Fresh perspectives, bold thinking. Some of our senior team members have become too comfortable, too set in their ways. Jamie glanced at me nervously. We both knew where this was heading. Which brings me to a difficult decision, Derek said, his tone shifting to mock solemnity. Alex, your contract is being terminated, effective immediately. The words hit the room like a physical force. Marcus's pen clattered to the table and I heard Jamie's sharp intake of breath. But what struck me most was Derek's expression. Not regret or professional courtesy, but barely concealed satisfaction. I'm sorry. I kept my voice level though my heart was racing. Your ideas are stale, Derek announced, projecting his voice as if he were addressing shareholders rather than a small conference room. 12 years is a long time in tech. We need fresh talent, people who can think outside the box instead of relying on outdated methodologies. The room fell silent except for the persistent buzzing of those fluorescent lights. I looked around at my colleagues. People I'd mentored, collaborated with, celebrated successes alongside for over a decade. Their faces showed a mixture of shock and sympathy, but also the careful neutrality of people protecting their own positions. Your final paycheck will include 2 weeks severance, Derek continued, already shuffling his papers as if my termination were just another agenda item. HR will handle the exit paperwork. I'll need your company laptop and access cards before you leave today. I stood slowly, my legs steadier than I'd expected. I understand. Good, Derek said without looking up. Marcus, I want you to take over Alex's current projects. We'll backfill the position with someone more aligned with our innovation goals. As the meeting dissolved around me, I walked back to my desk in the open office area. The familiar space looked different now. The photos of company retreats, the awards for technical excellence, the coffee-stained notepad where I'd sketched out breakthrough solutions. All of it suddenly felt like artifacts from someone else's life. I opened my desk drawers methodically, separating personal items from company property. My colleagues kept glancing over with expressions of disbelief and sympathy, but nobody approached. Corporate layoffs created their own social dynamics, and proximity to the terminated was often seen as contagious. 20 minutes later, I had packed everything into a small cardboard box. My company laptop sat on the desk surface next to my access badge and parking card. The tools of 12 years of dedicated service reduced to returnable assets. Derek appeared at my cubicle, flanked by Janet from HR. All set? He asked with manufactured professionalism. I handed over the laptop and cards without comment. Your final paycheck will be deposited Friday, Janet said gently. She'd been with the company longer than Derek and clearly felt uncomfortable with the situation. If you need a reference letter for future opportunities, please don't hesitate to reach out. Derek's smile was cold. I'm sure Alex will land on his feet. The market always needs reliable maintenance programmers. The insult was deliberate and public. Several nearby colleagues had stopped working to witness my departure, and Derek wanted to ensure they understood that innovation belonged to new leadership, not legacy employees. I picked up my box and walked toward the elevator, my footsteps echoing in the suddenly quiet office. As the doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of the Nexus Tech logo on the wall. The company I'd helped build now moving forward without me. In my car, I sat in the parking lot for several minutes, processing what had just happened. The initial shock was giving way to something else. Not anger exactly, but a calculating clarity I hadn't felt in years. Derek had made a critical error in judgment, one that would become apparent very soon. I pulled out my personal phone and dialed a familiar number. Henderson Patents and Licensing, the receptionist answered. This is Alex Chin. I need to speak with Robert Henderson about the Nexus Flow licensing agreement. Robert had handled my patent portfolio for years, managing the complex web of licensing deals that generated significant passive income while keeping my identity protected from potential workplace conflicts. He came on the line immediately. Alex, good to hear from you. How can I help? I need to review the termination clauses in the Nexus Tech licensing agreement. Specifically, the sections dealing with employment status changes. There was a pause as Robert accessed my file. Ah yes. Very thorough contract language. If your employment status with the licensee changes for any reason, you have the right to renegotiate or terminate the licensing agreement with 30 days notice. And current royalty status? Quite healthy. Nexus Flow generated $847,000 in royalties for you last quarter alone. The product represents roughly 73% of Nexus Tech's total revenue according to their public filings. I smiled for the first time in days. Robert, I want you to prepare a formal notice of license termination. Effective in 72 hours. Are you certain? That's a substantial income stream, Anne. I'm certain. And Robert? I want the notice delivered to Derek Thornton personally. Over the next 3 days, I maintained my regular routine while quietly preparing for what was coming. I updated my resume, reached out to my professional network, and fielded several calls from former Nexus colleagues who'd heard about my termination through the office grapevine. It's insane, Jamie told me over coffee Tuesday morning. Derek's already assigned your projects to 3 different people. Nobody understands the core architecture like you did. I'm sure they'll figure it out, I said, though internally I doubted that. The Nexus Flow algorithms were elegantly complex, requiring deep understanding of both the mathematical principles and their practical implementation. Derek had fired the one person who truly understood how everything worked together. Wednesday morning, I was reviewing job listings when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Nexus Tech's main number. Alex, thank God you answered. It was Marcus and he sounded panicked. We have a major problem with Nexus Flow. The core processing engine just stopped working completely. I kept my voice neutral. Stopped working how? Everything. The authentication protocols, the optimization algorithms, the data processing modules. It's like someone flipped a switch. We're getting error messages about invalid licensing, but IT says all our software licenses are current. Through my home office window, I could see the morning joggers on the neighborhood trail. People starting their Wednesday routines with no idea that one of the tech industry's most successful products had just become unusable. Have you contacted technical support? I asked. That's just it. The error messages aren't pointing to any of our usual vendors. They reference something called Chin Algorithmic Solutions. Nobody here has ever heard of it. Chin Algorithmic Solutions was the shell company I'd established years ago to license my patents. The name had seemed clever at the time, though I'd never expected circumstances where its significance would become so obvious. I'm sure it's just a licensing glitch, I said. These things usually resolve themselves. Alex, listen. Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper. Derek is losing his mind. 3 major clients are already calling about service disruptions. If we can't fix this by end of business today, we're looking at massive contract penalties. After hanging up, I made myself a cup of coffee and waited. The call I was expecting came 47 minutes later. Alex. Derek's voice was strained, all his earlier arrogance replaced by barely controlled panic. We need to talk. Hello, Derek. How can I help you? This licensing issue with Nexus Flow. We think it might be related to some of your old code. Could you come in today and take a look? I set down my coffee cup, savoring the moment. I'm not sure I understand. You said my ideas were stale and that you needed fresh talent. Look, we can work out the details later. Right now we need to get the system operational. Our clients are furious and the board is asking questions I can't answer. Derek, I'm no longer a Nexus Tech employee. You terminated my contract Monday. Surely your fresh talent can handle a simple licensing issue. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. What do you want? Derek finally asked, his voice tight. I want you to understand something, I said, allowing a trace of steel to enter my voice. Nexus Flow isn't just built on algorithms I helped optimize. It's built on algorithms I created and own. Every core function, every processing module, every piece of mathematical logic that makes your flagship product work. I hold the patents. Another silence, this one even longer. That's impossible, Derek whispered. Chin Algorithmic Solutions, Derek. Check your licensing agreements. For 8 years, Nexus Tech has been paying royalties to use my intellectual property. As of this morning, that license has been revoked. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line. The termination notice should have been delivered to your office about an hour ago, I continued. Probably sitting on your desk right now. The line went dead. 20 minutes later, Janet from HR called. Alex, could you please come in this afternoon? Derek would like to discuss some contract modifications. I arrived at Nexus Tech to find the office in controlled chaos. Several developers clustered around monitors displaying error messages, while others worked phones trying to reassure panicked clients. The energy was completely different from my last visit. Instead of routine productivity, there was an undertone of crisis barely held in check. Derek met me at the elevator, his expensive suit wrinkled and his usually perfect hair disheveled. We need to talk privately. In his office, he closed the door and leaned against it as if afraid I might escape. The licensing notice. Is this some kind of negotiating tactic? It's a business decision, I said, settling into the chair across from his desk. When you terminated my employment, you triggered clauses in the licensing agreement that allowed me to reconsider our business relationship. Business relationship? Derek's voice cracked slightly. You worked here. You can't just own the patents to our main product. I can and do. I developed those algorithms on my own time using my own resources, then licensed them to Nexus Tech through my company. It was all perfectly legal and properly documented. Derek slumped into his chair, the fight draining out of him. What do you want? I want my job back, I said simply. Full reinstatement with an apology to the team for the misunderstanding about my termination. And the licensing? We can discuss new terms. More favorable to both parties, perhaps. Derek stared at me across his desk and I could see him working through the implications. Without Nexus Flow, Nexus Tech would lose their primary revenue stream within weeks. The contracts, the client relationships, the company's entire market position. All of it depended on algorithms that existed at my discretion. The board will never approve bringing you back after such a public termination, he said weakly. I smiled. Then I guess you'll need to be creative in how you present it to them. I'm sure someone with your innovative thinking can find a solution. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. That afternoon, Derek announced to the team that there had been a strategic miscommunication about my employment status. The company was implementing a new consulting arrangement that would keep me involved in critical projects while allowing me to pursue additional opportunities. It was corporate speak for, we desperately need him back but can't admit we made a mistake. The Nexus Flow systems came back online that evening, and by the following week, things had returned to normal, with one significant difference. Derek's attitude toward me had shifted from condescending dismissal to wary respect. He still tried to take credit for innovations in board meetings, but he no longer questioned my technical decisions or dismissed my contributions. 6 months later, I negotiated a new licensing agreement that tripled my royalty rates and included guaranteed consultation fees. Derek had learned that innovation sometimes comes from unexpected sources, and that dismissing experienced talent can have consequences that extend far beyond hurt feelings. As for my colleagues, they never learned the full details of what had happened, but they understood that something fundamental had changed in the office dynamics. The lesson was clear. In the tech industry, the quiet person in the corner might be the one holding all the cards. The family business. Thompson & Sons Manufacturing had been my whole life since I could walk. I grew up watching my father build it from nothing, spending weekends playing under his desk while he worked, learning every aspect of the operation from the ground up. But today, standing in my brother Michael's office, I realized that dreams don't always follow the path you expect. Are you even listening, Sarah? Michael's voice cut through my thoughts, sharp and dismissive. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're never focused, never serious about the business. I gripped the armrests of my chair, trying to maintain composure. I heard you. I just don't agree. The Miller contract needs a different approach. If we could just dash. If we could just what? He leaned back in Dad's old leather chair, his chair now since Dad's stroke 6 months ago. Follow your innovative ideas? Your modern approach. His air quotes made the words sound like insults. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the executive office, highlighting the family photos on the wall. Mom and Dad at the company's opening 30 years ago. Michael graduating business school. Me. Well, there weren't many photos of me up there. The market is changing, I tried again. We can't keep doing things the same way and expect dash. Enough. Michael slammed his hand on the desk. You know what your problem is, Sarah? You think you know better than everyone else. But guess what? You don't have an MBA. You didn't graduate from Wharton. You just have your little community college degree and some crazy ideas about modernization." Each word felt like a slap. Yes, I'd gone to community college. Not because I couldn't get into a better school, but because someone needed to stay and help Dad run things while Michael was off getting his precious MBA. "Those crazy ideas increased our efficiency by 30% last quarter," I reminded him. He scoffed. "Pure luck. Listen, I've been thinking about this for a while. With Dad's condition." He paused, feigning sadness. "The company needs strong, educated leadership. Not emotional decisions based on hunches." My stomach dropped. I knew where this was going. "I'm buying out your shares," he announced. "The paperwork's already drawn up." He slid a folder across the desk. "You can't do that," I whispered. "Dad always meant for us to run this together." "Dad's not here anymore, is he?" Michael's voice was cold. "And as majority shareholder and CEO, I can do whatever I want. The offer's fair, more than fair, considering your limited contribution." I opened the folder with trembling hands. The numbers swam before my eyes, but one thing was clear: he was severely undervaluing my shares. "This is barely a quarter of what they're worth." He shrugged. "Take it or leave it. But remember, I can make things very difficult for minority shareholders who don't cooperate." "You're forcing me out," I said, the reality finally hitting me. "Your own sister. Business is business." He stood up, straightening his expensive tie. "Let's be honest, Sarah. You're too stupid for business. You always have been. Dad kept you around out of guilt, but I'm doing you a favor. Take the money, start a boutique or whatever it is women do these days." I sat there, memories flooding back. Weekends spent learning every machine on the factory floor while Michael attended networking events. Nights helping Dad with paperwork while Michael partied at business school. The pride in Dad's eyes when I suggested improvements that saved the company thousands. "Dad wouldn't want this," I said quietly. "Dad's not making decisions anymore." Michael's voice was final. "Sign the papers by the end of the week or I'll make sure you regret it." I stood up slowly, my legs feeling like lead. "You'll regret this, Michael." He laughed, actually laughed. "What are you going to do? Run to Daddy? Oh wait, you can't. He probably doesn't even remember who you are anymore." Something inside me snapped. Not in a dramatic, angry way, but in a quiet, determined way that felt more dangerous. "Goodbye, Michael," I said calmly, picking up my purse. "Good luck with the Miller contract. You're going to need it." "Is that a threat?" He called after me, but I was already walking out, head held high. In the elevator, I pulled out my phone and made a call I should have made months ago. "Marcus? It's Sarah Thompson. Remember that proposal we discussed? I'm in. But we do it my way." Marcus Chin, my old college professor and mentor, had been trying to get me to start my own company for years. He'd seen potential in me that my family never had. "About time," he said. "I've been sitting on some interesting patents. When can you meet?" I looked back at the Thompson & Sons building as I walked to my car. "I'm free right now. And Marcus? We're going to need to move fast." The next 3 months were a blur of activity. While Michael smugly ran Thompson & Sons into the ground with his outdated methods, I was building something new. Something better. Marcus's patents, combined with my practical knowledge and some innovative thinking, led to manufacturing processes that were years ahead of the competition. We secured funding, hired key personnel, including some of Thompson & Sons' best engineers who jumped ship after hearing I was starting my own venture, and set up operations in a facility across town. I named the company Phoenix Industries. Michael would probably call it melodramatic, but I didn't care. I was rising from the ashes of his betrayal, and I was going to soar higher than he ever dreamed possible. The best part? He had no idea. As far as Michael knew, I was sulking at home, probably spending my buyout money on shoes or whatever else he thought women wasted money on. 6 months after being forced out of my family's company, I sat in my new office, bigger than Michael's, with a better view, looking at an email that made me smile. Meeting confirmed with Miller Industries CEO. They're unhappy with current supplier and looking for new manufacturing solutions. Miller Industries, Thompson & Sons' biggest client. The one Michael was so sure he could handle better than me. I leaned back in my chair, remembering Michael's words. "You're too stupid for business." Well, brother dear, I thought, let's see who's stupid now. 3 years passed in what felt like both an eternity and a blink. Phoenix Industries grew faster than even my optimistic projections had predicted. By our second year, we had expanded to 3 facilities. By the third, we were a major player in the manufacturing sector, though I kept my role as CEO carefully hidden behind layers of corporate structure. I followed Thompson & Son's decline with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Michael's leadership was exactly what I'd expected, all flash, no substance. He spent more time in business lunches than on the factory floor, more concerned with appearances than actual operations. Then came the day I'd been waiting for. "Miss Thompson." My assistant's voice came through the intercom. "The Miller Industries representatives are here for their meeting." I smoothed my designer suit, Armani, bought with my own money, not a family handout, and smiled. "Send them in." Thomas Miller Jr., CEO of Miller Industries, walked in first. Behind him came his executive team, and bringing up the rear was exactly who I'd hoped to see: my brother Michael, looking nervous but trying to hide it. He didn't recognize me at first. 3 years had changed me. Gone was the timid sister, insensible business casual. In her place stood a CEO in every sense of the word. Success, as it turns out, is the best makeover. "Sarah." Michael's voice cracked when he finally realized who I was. "What are you doing here?" Before I could respond, Thomas Miller stepped forward, hand extended. "Miss Thompson. I had no idea you were the CEO everyone's been talking about. Phoenix Industries' innovation in manufacturing is revolutionary." Michael's face went from confused to shocked to pale so fast it was almost comical. "CEO," he stammered. I smiled, shaking Thomas's hand. "Please call me Sarah. Shall we begin the presentation?" The next hour was perhaps the most satisfying of my life. I walked them through Phoenix Industries' capabilities, our innovative processes, our quality control measures. Everything Michael had dismissed as crazy ideas was now industry-leading technology. Michael sat in stunned silence as Thomas and his team grew increasingly excited about what we offered. "These efficiency ratings are incredible," Thomas said, examining our reports. "And your quality control standards. This is exactly what we've been looking for." "Unlike some companies," I said, looking directly at Michael, "we believe in evolving with the market." Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He knew what was coming. "About that," Thomas turned to Michael. "I'm sorry, but this is exactly why we're terminating our contract with Thompson & Sons. Your methods are outdated, your costs are too high, and quite frankly your quality has been slipping. But we've been your suppliers for 20 years. Michael protested. "We can change, adapt dash. Like you adapted 3 years ago?" I interrupted softly. "When modern ideas were presented to you." The room fell silent. Michael's face turned red as recognition dawned in Thomas's eyes. "Wait," Thomas said, looking between us. "You two know each other?" "Michael is my brother," I explained calmly. "He forced me out of our family business 3 years ago. Said I was too stupid for business." Thomas's eyebrows shot up. "Well," he said after a moment, "I guess we can all see how that assessment turned out." After the meeting, as everyone filed out, Michael lingered behind. He looked older, tired, desperate. "Sarah," he started, "we need to talk." "Now you want to talk?" Kept my voice level. 3 years ago, you didn't want to hear anything I had to say. "The company's struggling," he admitted. "Dad's medical bills, the market changes. We could use your help." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My help? I thought I was too stupid for business." "I was wrong, okay?" He ran a hand through his graying hair. "Is that what you want to hear? You were right, I was wrong. Now can we discuss how to save the family company?" I walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. "You know what's interesting, Michael? When you forced me out, you said, 'Business is business.' Remember that?" He nodded miserably. "Well, now I'm saying it. Business is business. Phoenix Industries will be taking over Miller's contracts, along with any other clients smart enough to recognize superior quality and innovation. You'd destroy your own family's company?" His voice rose. "What about Dad's legacy?" I turned to face him, my expression hard. "Dad's legacy? Let's talk about that. Dad built that company on innovation, on understanding the market, on valuing every employee's contribution. You destroyed his legacy the moment you decided an MBA made you better than everyone else." "Sarah, please dash. I've built something here, Michael. Something bigger than Thompson & Sons ever was. And I did it without the family name, without your precious Wharton connections, without anything except the knowledge Dad taught me and the ideas you called crazy. He slumped in his chair, defeated. What do you want? Want? I smiled. I don't want anything from you. I have everything I need. But I'll make you an offer. Not because you deserve it, but because somewhere in that hospital, Dad still remembers building his company with love and innovation. I pulled a folder from my desk, mirror image of the one he'd pushed at me 3 years ago. Phoenix Industries will buy Thompson & Sons. The offer's fair, more than fair, considering your company's current state. Take it or leave it. His hands shook as he opened the folder. This would mean you'd work for me, I finished. No executive position, no corner office. You'll start where I started, on the factory floor, learning how things actually work. You can't be serious. Business is business, remember? I sat back in my chair. Think of it as an educational opportunity. You might finally learn what I was trying to tell you 3 years ago. He stared at the papers for a long moment. And if I refuse? Then watch as every major client follows Miller Industries' lead. Watch your precious MBA become worthless as Thompson & Sons crumbles. Your choice. After he left, clutching the folder and what remained of his pride, I called my assistant. Linda, please clear my schedule for the afternoon. I need to visit someone. The nursing home was quiet when I arrived. Dad sat in his usual spot by the window looking out at the garden. His condition had stabilized over the years. He wouldn't get better, but he had good days. Today was a good day. He smiled when he saw me, his eyes clear and recognizing. Sarah, he said softly. Hi, girl. I sat beside him, taking his hand. Hi, Dad. I have something to tell you. For the next hour I told him everything. About Michael's betrayal, about Phoenix Industries, about the offer I'd just made. He listened quietly, occasionally squeezing my hand. When I finished, he turned to me with tears in his eyes. You did good, sweetheart. You did real good. I learned from the best, I said, my own eyes wet. He shook his head. No, you learned and then you got better. That's what a real business person does. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sunset through the window. Michael will sign, Dad said finally. You think so? He nodded. He has your mother's pride, but he has my practical sense too. Eventually, he'll realize it's the only way to save anything. 2 days later, Linda brought me a folder. Inside was the purchase agreement, signed by Michael. I looked at his signature for a long moment, remembering all the times he'd made me feel small, insignificant, stupid. Now he would work for me, learn from me, see exactly what stupid could accomplish. But as I signed my own name, not as Sarah Thompson, the sister he'd dismissed, but as Sarah Thompson, CEO of Phoenix Industries, I realized something. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about coming full circle, about taking Dad's legacy and making it something even greater. I picked up my phone and dialed Linda's extension. Please set up a meeting with the Thompson & Sons transition team. And Linda? Have them meet us on the factory floor. It's time everyone remembered where real business happens. 3 months later, I stood on the factory floor of what was now Phoenix Industries' newest facility, the former Thompson & Sons building. Michael worked a few stations down, learning quality control processes from one of our veteran employees. He wasn't happy about it, but he was learning. Dad sat in his wheelchair beside me, having insisted on visiting during one of his good days. He watched the operations with clear eyes, nodding in approval at the improvements I'd made. You know what I see? He asked, patting my hand. What's that, Dad? I see a legacy. Not just mine anymore. Yours. I squeezed his hand, watching as my company, my real family legacy, continued to grow and thrive. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying what hurt you. Sometimes it's about building something so much better that they're forced to admit they were wrong. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's about teaching them the lesson they should have learned in the first place. Michael might have kicked me out of the family business, but in doing so he forced me to create something bigger than either of us had imagined. Maybe that's the real legacy, not just surviving betrayal but using it as fuel to soar higher than ever before. After all, that's why I named it Phoenix Industries. Sometimes you have to burn before you can rise.